Jim, first of all, I want to say a huge thank you for having me on. I was an entrepreneur before my time at Google. This is my second time as a founder. And it was really a meetup just like this in my prior company that led us to our first couple of major customers that put my last company on the map. I've been a presenter in a number of GDGs in my role at Google, and now just starting here in my new role at RunWhen. And I just want to say a big congratulations, because the Southlake, your Southlake chapter is frankly widely considered to be the best organized chapters. And I'm saying that from personal experience, having talked at a bunch across 2 companies now. So I just wanted to say a big thank you.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah. I think I totally blew it because I had a whole thank you slide, and I already, I'm doing what I can. A thank you to everybody on the GDG Southlake crew. I know, Jim, you put together a great team, and I know it's not a one-person effort, it's a team effort. And thank you to everybody. It means a lot for vendors in our stage. I'm going to get into this in a sec, but we wrote this when Jim and I were talking about sort of who would be coming and what we would talk about. The intention was almost presentations in one. One is talking about building engineering assistants. With the company RunWhen, we've built a platform that helps you build engineering assistants, and we'll talk a lot about that. For a lot of people here who are currently in jobs, that part of the presentation is for you. There's another part of the presentation that sounds funny. It's for all the people that I hope are dialing in who are in between roles right now. We have a very specific contributor program. We call it the author program, where we pay royalties for open source contributions. And you might have seen that in the description. I'm going to touch on that a little bit. It's really funny when we come in, hey, we're looking for all the people who are between jobs at the moment. That's our audience. So I want to say you're going to see the 2 in 1. But let me first start out with whichever group you happen to part of at the moment. I'm guessing most everybody on this call has some experience, either directly or with one of your colleagues, on a phone screen full of notifications. It looks a little bit like this. This very specifically, one of the tech leads, one of our customers, turned his phone around to me about 2 months ago, and he said, Kyle, this is why we need RunWhen. Because every hour that I'm in a meeting is an hour that our project slips. It was fascinating. And as we double click, look, you can't automate being in a critical meeting. You can't automate leading a meeting amongst your colleagues. You'll never be able to automate a really in-depth design discussion on what the cloud architecture looks like on a platform team, what the reliability engineering side of it looks like, what a DevOps side of it looks like. These are things that you'll never be able to automate or delegate, but a huge amount of those constant interruptions, we claim that you can automate that. Let me also start. We have a fundamental belief that lean teams are here to stay. I can't tell you how many folks, especially engineering leaders I talk to, really come in 2 camps. One camp is, oh, my team is 40% smaller and we're going to start growing again soon. And the other camp is, hey, my team is 40% small and we're probably going to stay that way. We might have many more teams, but a 5-person engineering team is now doing what a 12 to 15% engineering team used to do, and we're just going to have a lot more 5s and more 3s. It means there are tons of automation opportunities. Everybody looks around and says, my gosh, we could automate this. We have so few people, we need to automate that. But nobody has the time. But there's no spare time in the system at all across any enterprise team that we work with. So we have this saying, look, when you can't add more engineers, build engineering assistants. I was really excited. We've now had several of our customers come back saying, wow, this was really fast. And 2 of them specifically did like, hey, we compared kind of like for like and came back with, hey, building engineering assistants was 100 times faster than spinning up an automation initiative with traditional technologies. And is 1/5 the cost of outsourcing the work. this got me very excited when I started hearing people say those kinds of numbers. I'll show a couple things that that we're doing with a couple clients, then I'll dig into some more detail on how do we build an assistant. The one on the left, this I remember the tech lead of this team. So this was an 8-person platform team onboarding 150 new developers who had never developed anything on Kubernetes, and they were trying to onboard them all with all their applications on a mass migration to GKE. They got 0 new headcount. 150 new developers, the platform team got 0 new headcount. I remember the tech lead of the team saying, "Hey, God, without RunWhen, I don't think anybody on my team would be able to go to the bathroom for a month." I mean, just the sheer volume of support. Can you think? I mean, the sheer volume of other things, but think of the sheer volume of support of helping out 150 folks just getting started. I love this other project. This team is $800 million worth of outsourced L0, L1 contracts, and the math that we found that we've now proven over and over again is with one real expert SRE paired with engineering assistants, that person reliably outperforms a team of 10 from their low-cost outsourcer. And we're just going project by project, replacing these teams of 10 with one expert and engineering assistants. And with that level of automation, frankly, the company is saving 50% every time we do that trade, and they're ending up on the other side with an extraordinarily high-end team. So I love this one. We can talk through a few more examples, but we have this kind of cheeky saying, look, executives have executive assistants. Teachers have teaching assistants. Dentists have dental assistants. Engineers should have engineering assistants. They're not doing the engineering, but they're making all the engineering much more possible, much more efficient. When in my old role at Google, I was a senior director for product management for Kubernetes. I had a wonderful executive assistant. It's not like she was going to do my presentations for me, but simply she made my life so much more productive because picture 50 meetings a week. Every time something changes, it's a lot of people that need to get moved around. The intuition here in engineering work, think about like work that could be done on the CLI. That's fundamentally what we're trying to do with engineering assistants. They're emulating work that can be done on the CLI. They can do some other things too, but it's the simplest way to think about it. And I hope that when you look at this sort of laundry list of things that they're doing for platform teams, for developers, and production, that a fair number of people on this call say, oh yeah, that happened this morning. Oh yeah, no, that was yesterday. Wouldn't it be nice to just delegate that to your assistant? Every time I say 100x faster, people are like, yeah, it's interesting. In the first 5 minutes, you got to prove it. Jim's laughing because he's heard this a couple of times.
Like, why not 1,000,000 times faster?
I'll show it in a few minutes, but to give some intuition, if you were going to automate a workflow, you'd be writing code. You'd be setting up an environment where that for your code, you'd be setting up a production environment where it can run, et cetera, et cetera. This model's a little different, and I don't think this model was possible before AI. In this model, you sync a Kubernetes account, a GCP account. We also do AWS and Azure, but you sync an account and you say, hey, here are the expert libraries that I want. By default, it'll import the RunWhen read-only libraries, but you can say, no, like this vendor, I like this vendor. Hey, I also like these 4 high-profile individuals. I'm going to pull in their automation as well. To give you a kind of rough sense, syncing a mid-sized Kubernetes cluster will generally bring in on the order of 3,000 or 4,000 automated steps from different libraries, just from the RunWhen default libraries. So think about a couple thousand steps kind of get pulled in about 20 minutes just by syncing the thing. Instead of creating a workflow, you give an engineering assistant a goal. And it goes out and it looks for automated steps that it can take to reach that goal. It'll take a step. It'll look at the output of that step. It'll look at some other information that it's aware of in the environment, and it'll take a next step. And then take a look at the output, and then take the next step, and then take the next step, and take the next step. We had this wonderful quote from the platform director of one of the organizations that we're working with. It's not like we're using AI to write these steps from scratch. That's not an LLM problem. It's a context problem. We tried it. I think came convinced it's climbing trees to get to the moon. We're using AI to sequence these tasks to try to figure out what's the right next task to run. And we had this wonderful quote. This guy said, hey, this is the most practical form of AI for DevOps that I've ever seen. And it's wonderful to just watch the whole thing working today. And for us, even more interesting, there's so little code and configuration. You're literally giving you're syncing a cluster and you're giving an assistant a goal that most teams get up and running in about an hour. Because that's all the time that any team has. I think traditional automation where it's, hey, we're going to do like 2 months of architecture work, and then we're going to do like a couple of weeks of coding work, and then more coding work, and then more coding work. And then at the end of a year, we will have automated maybe 20 workflows. That those projects are going to become history, because not because they don't have impact, but just because nobody has the time. So I view it as incredibly important, and it's a breakthrough because of AI, that we can do really interesting automation, high impact automation, up and running in an hour. Just to make it a little bit more concrete, and we'll show building, we have these examples of, I don't know how many folks on this call are familiar with the tutorial, the Google Online Boutique that my old team wrote. It's a tutorial app for Kubernetes. It's 12 microservices and a mocked up e-commerce app. I know it's gone through a number of names over the years. We love our canonical demo. The cart service is down. Maybe you saw that as an alert. Maybe you intuited that from a dashboard. Maybe you just saw somebody hit you up in Slack, say, hey, in the test environment, the cart service is down. The assistant ran 13 tasks in response to that goal, generated a beautiful detailed report. You can see the little bubbles. Also generated, hey, here's some issues that I think are worth further review. And at the bottom, hey, found a task that actually made a request. That might be worth looking at. We'll take a look at that one in a minute. I think our whole goal is that your engineering team your engineering assistant did all of this so that you could be in the architecture meeting, where real expertise is truly needed. Now, if you were in the meeting and an assistant ran this, then your colleagues would see that. A nice, simple suggestion at the end that says, hey, here's what I think you should do next. Maybe they know Kubernetes, maybe they don't know anything about Kubernetes. Maybe they're really, really deep in Google Cloud. Maybe they're not. I have a wonderful story on this. It was about 9-10 months ago or so. Our system was stable enough that we were just starting to use it. Our front-end developer, time zone-wise, at the time, was 5 hours ahead of our head of DevOps. And I remember it was a beautiful thing, waking up to see this message on Slack from our front-end developer. It said, hey, I was getting HTTP 500s in the test environment, so I asked the engineering assistant. It hopped through an ingress, it then hopped into a deployment, and then hopped into the database under deployment, and then started actually troubleshooting our storage volumes underneath. And there's a PVC in this particular dev environment, PVC ID yada yada. That could somebody please expand that by 20% so that my thing can get through. And the next line on Slack was, and what's a PVC anyways? It was wonderful. It was beautiful. That got me really, really excited. So anyways, your engineering assistant can boil down like one simple next step for any of your colleagues. He says, hey, if you can only do one thing, here's what I think you should do next. Your execs get beautiful analytics, and that's really important when running an automation program, to be able to say, hey, how much automation got used, who wrote it, who's running it, is it finding problems? These are all wonderful things. And also, what are the next steps that the assistants were recommending that were not automated? It lets you do sort of the Google monthly style ops review, where you go through and you say, hey, here are all of the areas that were not automated, and which of those are we going to automate the next month? So in terms of, for a manager running an automation program, a real automation initiative, this is the kind of analytics that they need to run a high impact initiative. And then we have this unique business model that when our enterprise users run the automation, for whoever wrote it, we pay them a royalty. Obviously, there are lots of caveats. Hey, if you're working for the company, there are lots of caveats around this. But our goal is really that people can say, hey, I trust this company, I trust this individual who's got high brand, clearly takes care of things. I trust this individual. And for the authors that you trust, we want to make sure that when they contribute, they're not contributing automation out of the goodness of their heart. They're contributing automation because it helps pay the bills. Last quarter, our top author made around $6,000. If we make our sales forecast next year, we'll put about $180,000 into the author community. I don't think that's enough for anybody to make it work as a full-time job next year, but the year after, if we do what we think we're going to do, we should see the first few people as full-time, where we can support them as full-time authors. And I'm really excited about that. Now, just getting into the next level of detail here, when you sync a cluster or cloud account with, everybody starts with a RunWhen default read-only libraries. Pull in a couple thousand tasks. Here are a couple examples of engineering assistance that you can build out of the gates. I'm going to focus on Eager Edgar for a little bit. Eager Edgar, a developer gets stuck. Eager Edgar can run all kinds of diagnostics about their deployment to try to figure out what they should be doing next to help out. We generally see engagements. Well, actually, let me talk about that on the next slide. We generally see engagements, like we see teams, figuring out the order of events is really, really, really important, because none of the teams that we work with have any time to spare. So we most often see teams building an assistant that looks a little bit like Eager Edgar, something so that their engineering team, their development teams can specifically do a lot of troubleshooting dev and test environments on their own. We see people do that first because it saves so much time and it works out of the box. And it saves the team enough time to get a little bit more detailed to integrate, for example, into their alerting system that they're using in test environments. Maybe to build a couple of their own, we call them AI-ready tasks, out of a handful of CLI commands, maybe out of a SQL query or a REST query that they like. But the first one saves enough time to build the second one saves enough time to build the third one, and so on and so forth. This to me is sort of the beautiful case. This is a team that they started doing all of these at once. The backstory was a corporate reorg, and so the SRE team, the corporate SRE team, pulled back and said, hey, the dev team has to start doing some of the on-call, shared on-call responsibility. As expected, feature velocity dropped through the floor. No surprise. A cross-functional team between dev, platform, and SRE said, hey, what can we do? Let's invest heavily in automation. We started working with them. They added automation to automation, and dev velocity came back not only to where it was, it actually came back up above where it was. And that's a big, audacious claim. I'd be happy to send around a really detailed white paper on the case. I'm just incredibly proud of the way that this worked out, and I'm really proud of this team. Because if you really double click, 98% of the automation that the dev team is using to diagnose failed tests, to speed them up, to say a regression test failed, why, is also used to triage production alerts. So they're getting a whole ton of L01 automation for free, because it was actually originally written by developers to speed up the process of troubleshooting failed regression tests. And it's also going the other way around. On the Corp SRE side, automation that they're using to collect a whole bunch of information for incidents. So before they escalate, so they have a big kind of body of research, so that when they do an escalation, somebody asks a question, they have the answers right at their fingertips. They imported a ton of automation. They wrote some application-specific calls, specifically, a handful of specific queries. that automation has turned out to be extraordinarily useful for developers whenever the test environment's unhealthy. So there's no more, hey, test env is something's going wrong, I'm blocked, I'm going out to lunch, I'll be back in a little bit. The exact same automation that was written for production is actually backported into test. And I love seeing these collaborative stories because I don't think that people immediately think like, hey, automation and collaboration should be the same. But the structure where everybody's just writing little tiny snippets and AI is stitching them all together, I think that's something special, and it opens up really a new collaboration opportunity between teams that makes everybody more efficient. Folks who are interested, they always say, hey, can I get some coaching on how to build a business case? Because no matter how much I like the technology, if I can't build a business case, it's like, meh. I'm going to go through a couple different options. Even for platform DevOps teams, the most successful business cases that we see over and over for engineering assistants are just show where your developers get blocked. There's this great paper that I've mentioned in the footnotes, enough that you can find it. It's an IEEE Microsoft paper called Today Was a Good Day. It was a detailed survey of 5,000 developers at Microsoft. We sort of recreated part of it at tiny, just within our company, and did like-for-like comparisons of PRs. And yeah, the data is not surprising, but it's wonderful to see it play out. Okay, if your code worked on the first few tries, you're spending most of your time in the IDE. If it took, a bunch of iterations because you ran into some like deep logical issue inside of your own code, then figure you're spending a little bit more time on the CLI than the IDE, but it's about 50-50. If you ran into some issue in the environment that was outside of your code, some microservice you depend on was down, some data was corrupt or just surprisingly different from what you expected, some third-party SaaS product that you rely on was down, maybe GCP operated differently than you expected. I'm just saying, suddenly it jumps to about 8x the amount of time is spent troubleshooting on the CLI than is spent in the IDE. If you actually average that out, the Microsoft at very, very large scale came out to, on average, developers spend about 1.5x the amount of time in the CLI that they spend in the IDE. So if you think about putting together a business case to solve that particular issue, hey, a developer gets blocked, and it took them a long time to figure out that they're blocked because of an issue that's actually outside of their own code. It's easy to put together a business case around that. The productivity benefit is really, really, really obvious. We have templates that we can send if you like, but this is an easy one to put together. That's the base case. And then the upside case is, hey, all of the work that we did to unblock these developers all flows through to help us out for L0, L1 ops work in supporting test environments and production environments. That's just an upside to the case. This business case was actually kind of worked out so well for so many teams, we wound up actually putting a VS Code front end onto our engineering assistants so that you can ask them a question directly out of VS Code. As we do this, you can see, hey, the cart service is down. You can simply ask egreg or ask your assistant to say, all right, what should I do next? You get a handful of different kind of immediate tasks that show up if you wanted to run one single thing and that's it. The nice here, we tried to make these natural language so that, you kind of know sort of the Kubernetes words-ish for what you need, but you don't want to like spend a lot of time looking up the exact syntax. The exact same way, hey, if you're coming from an AWS background and you're trying to troubleshoot GCP, you kind of roughly know the words, but you don't need to know the detailed syntax to take all of your AWS knowledge and suddenly be extraordinarily effective at moving your way in and around GCP. And then at the bottom, I hope it's coming through on the video, you can always escalate to Shay Stewart, Shay's my colleague and our head of DevOps. You can't completely get in the way. You have to say it for a developer, like, hey, if this particular service is down, Shay is the owner of the cart service. If you're really stuck, go to Shay. But notice, I'm just going to let this play a little bit in the background. Something that I hope you see that plays directly into the business case here. The developer didn't end up blocked for hours and hours and hours on the CLI. They just asked a question, and you just see this play out. Let's pick the task where egregor is the most confident. The developer didn't escalate to a platform team for help. So we saved not one person, but we saved 2 people with all the context switching that comes along with it. And the developer didn't make a fuss about docs that need to be updated that tons and tons of people update, and then nobody ever reads ever again, which that sometimes is its own benefit. I'm just going to show a couple of things here. As the engineering assistant is running, I hope you saw that going while I was talking. The engineering assistant is, as we mentioned, raising issues for human review. Here are the things that it found along the way. Cart service is down. These are worth reviewing. You can see some of them are already grayed out. We've actually allowed this particular engineering assistant, this is Eager Edgar, when we use for demos, because we actually use the exact same configuration internally. We allow Eager Edgar not only open issues, we actually allow Eager Edgar to close issues as well. And Eager Edgar will close issues whenever Eager Edgar thinks that it's found a better issue, maybe something more specific or more actionable. We can see the open issues. And we can click through. If you're going to boil all of the issues and all the recommendations, I'll kind of show that in another screen in a minute, down to, hey, if there's only one thing that we think that somebody should do, they should update the readiness probe for the cart service to use port 7070. All that came from just a simple cart service is down. This isn't AI magic. This is AI sequencing a whole series of tasks that Kubernetes experts said, well, hey, here's what I would do, here's what I would do, here's what I would do, here's what I would do. And it's picking the right tasks to run every step along the way. I'll switch over to a live demo in a sec. And certainly, Jim, if there are questions that are coming up in the chat.
Yeah, there's just a couple maybe comments/questions. So from Zach Nickens, it's just kind of probably encouraging people to think, like, if you're a great way to think about these engineering assistants is, where's the toil in your organization? Where would you deploy your engineering assistants? And if you could deploy them to take care of some work, where might you use your real humans? Where do you put your real humans? What are they going to work on?
Beautiful.
And nowadays it's trying to do a lot more with a lot less. So I think there's seems like there's plenty of work to go around. Have you found anybody free up so much time that they just had people to build like brand new products?
Yeah, I would say there are a couple of dev teams that we've been working with now that net across 3 or 4 dev teams. I kind of come back to, like, I think that the future is going to be small teams and many of them rather than large teams. Mm-hmm. And we'll see as they go into their own planning cycle for next year. I suspect that the net of the planning cycle that they're going to do with their executives next year is to stay, instead of growing their teams, let's spin up a new team, and they're going to take actually a couple people from one of the existing teams and make them the leader of the new team. So effectively, they're going to spin up a 4th team rather than bulk up the existing 3, and the 4th team is going to get leaders from the existing 3 teams. It's going to be a wonderful promotion opportunity, frankly, for 2 of the folks.
Nice. And then maybe just a statement from Isaac Johnson. I forget what AWX playbooks stand for, but he's interesting to do. Ansible. Interested in comparing using Gemini Code Assist to just create AWX playbooks versus something like RunWhen that's kind of stitching different things together.
So the primary issue that we wind up seeing with these kind of static playbooks is that whenever there's environmental drift, the playbook's broken. And so as a practical matter, we see this with Ansible playbooks that are using specifically for kind of post-installation work. We see this with StackStorm, we see this with Rundeck, we certainly see this with DIY code. The workflows that you wind up building with those tend to be really short in practice, like 3, 4, 5 steps. Because they're fairly brittle, because if any step breaks, the entire playbook is broken. And the entire playbook stops. To me, for us, the norm is that an engineering assistant is running 10, 20, 30, sometimes 50 of these tasks, because they're sort of dynamically picking, all right, here's run one, run the next, run the next, run the next. The front-end engineering example that I mentioned before, literally the front-end engineering assistant wind up trying to troubleshoot an ingress object and then changing its mind, saying, hey, the problem actually isn't in the ingress object. The problem is in the deployment object. Started troubleshooting the deployment object. Turns out that deployment object was actually perfectly healthy, but enough of the output was referencing very slow database calls and then slow exceptions. And it used the word database just enough times that it started troubleshooting a database issue. And the database issues actually reference storage and reference persistent volume claims enough that it started actually troubleshooting the storage underneath. So rather than a static workflow where you have to think in advance of here are all the steps that are required, these things are building them on the fly based on observations that they're seeing. It's a lot more human-like.
Well, thanks for that. And I think that ran out of the questions in the chat so far. Isaac, hopefully that gave you a good point of view on what's different about that. All right. Are we almost at the live part?
Let me switch over. This is a summary view that for folks on this call who would be receiving escalations from developers or receiving escalations from junior SREs, this is the first thing that you would see. You can pop into the full report where you can start seeing, all right, here's all of the output from everything that was run. We can pop over to the analytics, but let's just say that's for all the people on this call that would be on the receiving end of an escalation. For folks who would be more on the giving end of the escalation, here's the timeline. Hey, cart service is down. Here's the timeline of all of the different tasks that eager started to run. First from initial search, and then eager started to actually respond to stuff that eager had already run and to respond to some queues in the environment. You can see some Kubernetes, but you can see some also direct interactions with Redis. And down near the bottom, eager found a remediation. Eager has no more issues to follow up on. The issues here, eager closed, had opened these issues because they found them along the way, and then closed them when the assistant said, all right, hey, here's a pull request. It's in need of review. Each of these, you can see each of these actually comes with their own suggested next steps. So this was the particular issue that said, okay, now we're kind of we're honing in on it. Cart service is down. All right, the deployment's unavailable. Hey, deployment was unable to start. Hey, there were configuration issues. We're kind of narrowing away down. The problem was the update. The problem was the out-of-date readiness probe. There's an open pull request. We're all GitOps. And if you actually look at the text of the pull request, you can see it's a pull request to update the readiness probe from port 7071, which was just a typo, over to port 7070. This is what we call a workspace just for the online boutique application. So this is a single namespace we've allowed to be scanned with a little few other tasks for sort of some public monitoring. We've let this particular application team have a little bit of a view into some of the GCP infrastructure that they're running. And you can see we get a little bit of a view for, okay, hey, 6 hours ago, clearly something was going around. 2 hours ago, something was going around. So 6 hours, there was something that was impacting shipping service and checkout service, and then more recently, something with a cart service. I'll show you. This isn't here. Let me just turn off the layers for a sec. This is a map. Well, one was a map of just an application. This is a map of an entire Kubernetes cluster, fairly small cluster. This is our sandbox cluster. This is 15 minutes in. So we ran this about 4 weeks ago. So we ran it, and then we haven't touched any configuration. We've just been letting this gather data and gather data and gather data, specifically so you can see, hey, out of the box, about 15 minutes after scanning, this is what the system looks like. You can actually see where, even out of the box, we started running alert-based automation based on, you can always pipe in data, whether it's Datadog or PagerDuty or Alert Manager, anything that generates a webhook. We also, by default, at least with the RunWhen read-only library, actually put in enough tasks that it actually runs its own small alert stack, and it'll kick off engineering assistance when we see unhealthy namespaces. And so you can see there have actually been some unhealthy names. There's been some unhealthy activity in Online Boutique. This is a different cluster than the other one, but same type of thing. 13 hours ago, the namespace was deemed to be unhealthy. And so assistants ran 94 tasks to try to figure out what was going wrong. There were a lot of issues at this point. This happened to be actually in the middle of there were other issues going on, and a node preempt happened at the same time, which we could figure out if we click through some of these things. But, for us, simply kind of neat to say, hey, out of the box, after the scan, we get an entire map with, at any point, we can start going in and seeing, hey, here are all the tasks. And this was just scanning just with the RunWhen read-only library enabled, not with any of the others. Checkout service. So we saw Redis, anyways, to kind of go into more and more depth here, there are, give or take, somewhere around 3,000, 3,200 or so total tasks like this that are loaded into this workspace.
We have a question from Maggie as she's thinking through looking at the cluster and the online boutique here. So I guess, and I'll add one more question to her question. So we've been looking at Kubernetes. Is that the only compute target that we're looking at, or do you do VMs and functions as a service and all those other types of things in the cloud? And Maggie's question is, on top of this one cluster, how do the assistants work? Would it just be like one assistant, like the Eager Edgar, that has a certain duty, or would there be other assistants that you'd want to point out the cluster as well?
Both great. Let me answer those in reverse order. By default, we put in 3 assistants, and then teams can build their own. But these 3 sort of generally are a pretty good demo. Sorry, just in this one, there are just going to be 2. Eager Edgar, where the search settings are very aggressive. So Eager Edgar, there will be noise when you ask Eager Edgar to do something, because Eager Edgar will run lots of tasks, but Eager Edgar will always have an idea, almost always have an idea of what to run next. Cautious Kathy, where the settings in the assistant are much more conservative. Cautious Kathy will much more often come back saying, I don't know what to do next, but much, much, much lower noise. And then we did this with the read-only library, so we don't see, but when you actually bring in a read-write library, by default, we put in a third one, admin alley. Admin alley has read-write credentials, whereas eager Edgar and cautious Kathy are read-only. So by giving kind of each of these a name, we're taking what's effectively like really, really complicated IAM permissions that would be kind of a nightmare to set up and making it very humanized.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, which person on the team do you want to go to? And that, that assistant is the one that holds the credentials. On the question, do we do more than just Kubernetes? If you asked me 6 months ago, 100% of at least the RunWhen libraries were Kubernetes. Well, maybe 9 months ago or so. At this point, about 72% of the RunWhen library is Kubernetes, and 28% is other. This doesn't include a couple of very large libraries that are being worked on in private that are supposed to land in public here, hopefully in Q4, worst case in Q1. But even with this registry, if you track it, we're adding somewhere around 10 to 15 automated tasks per month. So nice. Not bad. That's totally separate from all of our enterprise clients are obviously writing, they can have their own, you can have private libraries. So they're writing their own private ones, wrapping them around CLI commands, wrapping them around SQL queries, et cetera. But even just ours, even in public, we're adding about 10, 15 a month at this point. Since, one of the nice things about this author community, authors get royalties when their stuff gets run. They also work on bounties. And our author community is large enough. We literally have an enterprise engagement going right now. Like I said, hey, to start this POC, I really like this you have, but I really have a lot of dependency on Apache Airflow. And for us, it's like an $800 bounty out to our community to say, hey, can we just get 15 tasks written around maintenance for Apache Airflow? And specifically listed some of the things that we know he mentions taking up his time, and then a handful of others that we, from our own experience with Airflow, hey, here are some other things that we think are important, and then bonding out to the community to say, hey, what do folks in the community think are important? And let's turn that into a bounty for somebody to automate all of those tasks. You can see while we started, we started a year ago mostly in troubleshooting. You can see that we're starting to show some of the patterns. Certainly, like every one of our enterprise customers asked us about automating DevSecOps. Yes, we can automate anything that can be done in the CLI. We had asked like, hey, can we start automating some FinOps cases? Yes, we can automate anything we can get done in the CLI. So it's kind of fun to watch, even just very organically, how this has grown over the last 6 months, well beyond the original scope. We just had our first really large enterprise engagement. It was our second engagement with the same group. The first engagement was all Kubernetes, but we just had our second one that's entirely cloud functions. It was great to see like, okay, wow, our first engagement that has like a huge estate that actually has 0 Kubernetes in it was really a bit of a thrill.
Nice. So yeah, you have a core that you have already there, and that the community has helped build. People are building their own private things, and it just keeps expanding into whatever's needed. It sounds like the agents need their own service account in Google Cloud. With a couple of them have read-only permissions. Another one has read-write of various settings. Ones where you'd want to have them take action. For those that might not be completely in the cloud, do you have any intention on going on-prem, or have you been on-prem at all?
On-prem, we already have POCs running with on-prem OpenShift. And we have one very large financial services client where phase 1 is Kubernetes, phase 2 is cloud x Kubernetes. And then phase 3 starting next year is actually on-prem.
Okay. All right. So expanding and covering anything that has an endpoint that you can reach and have permissions to run things against. Is that kind of the idea?
Anything where we can interact with it on the CLI. We can do a little bit more, but the most intuitive thing to think about is if an engineer can interact with it on the CLI, then an engineering assistant can also interact with it on the CLI. And to your point on credentials, yes, you just give each engineering assistant their own set of credentials. Same way you would give a new member of the team.
Cool.
Eager Edgar, give Eager Edgar very conservative credentials. With some of our security sensitive clients too, it's kind of nice because you no longer actually need to give everybody on the team their own credentials, because most of the time they're actually just going to an engineering assistant. So we've seen a handful of teams now pull kube configs back, because that can be a little bit dangerous, especially for highly regulated industries. If you have to give a lot of developers kubectl access directly to production, that has gotten a few of our clients snarled up, and this has been the response.
It was funny while you're answering the question talking about security. Scott Lindquist had asked a question about security and then backed it out. He got his answer.
Just to sort of roll it up, I didn't show. Look, it's not super interactive. You can actually simply pipe alerts into these assistants as well. Anything that's got a webhook, they can take. So we certainly do plenty of alert manager, PagerDuty, Datadog, and then a lot of actually see it like Jenkins webhooks. Are super useful. The last little bit, I think this won't scale forever, but I think just sort of just as we're sort of wrapping up here. Two offers. A, for anybody here who is between roles and interested in joining the author community, we're always actively looking. The best thing to do is just hit me up over LinkedIn. We're not looking for an author community of 1,000 people. I don't think that it takes 1,000 people at all. I mean, on average, our authors are doing like about 3 to 4 tasks per week. I mean, I can show you the back of the envelopes that we're doing. To me, like a really great author community is around 75 people. I think 75 people can automate the vast majority of the cloud services across Google, Amazon, Azure, the top 100 open source projects that are used in every environment that we see. And then it takes about another 25 people to start making a real dent on-prem. It's amazing to me to see how much of the industry we can cover with a group of 75. So for people who are interested in that, just hit me over LinkedIn. I mean, that I think, do you get along well with the people who are already in the community? Can we all work together in a clean way? There's sort of some very important questions, and let's work together a little bit on that front. And then for folks that are currently in roles and more interested in building engineering assistants, look, I think a lot of people here have built playbooks and runbooks back in the day. Certainly everybody, I mean, to the earlier question about Ansible, like a huge amount of the folks we work with certainly know Ansible very, very well. We can wrap Ansible. But this AI-oriented automation is new. So our general offer is we'll help you build your first 3 assistants as a POC. And that's a no strings attached type of thing. We've gotten the process down fast enough that it's sort of, hey, the first one is in about an hour, and then a workshop, we can usually generate the next 2.
I have a question from Craig, not necessarily on being an author, but thinking back on the troubleshooting, like any networking equipment or API, or any API for network reachability analysis, just trying to, if you have physical network gear.
Craig, I would have guessed that you would have asked that one. We have one person who tried to write like an integration into ping mesh in this, but I think in terms of, I don't think that we have had an author yet, since Craig and I used to work together. I don't think we have an author yet, Craig, that even comes close to matching your particular network automation skills, like not even 1/100th. So I'm just saying, if you're interested at all, and the forward team will give you a little bit of time, we could use you. Your particular brand of genius. I'm really, really looking forward. I suspect that for us, there's cloud networking, and we do a little bit of cloud networking reachability, like a very, very, very small amount in a couple of the RunWhen tasks today. But it's a small amount. I suspect that we're going to wind up just knowing what people are asking from us now. I suspect fourth quarter, we're going to wind up doing a little bit more of that on GCP. And the really interesting challenge to me is going to be first half next year as we start to do network reachability analysis on-prem. I think that we're just going to see authors have a lot of, that our approach is, hey, give authors the tools that they want and let 1,000 flowers bloom on that front, because there's a lot of room for cool innovation, and there's a lot of room for really, really cool integrations with vendors like Forward that I think do a really awesome job of this today. So I'm looking forward to those days.
All right, a couple questions from Jim Tyhurst. What language is used to write these assistants? Is it possible to is it possible to look at one? And then the title has AI as part of the title. We're seeing the assistants, but he's trying to figure out where does the AI part come in to that flow.
Sure. So where we're using AI, we do two things. We have to be extraordinarily careful around our use of AI for two reasons. A, latency, which everybody's obviously, but B, we can't send any enterprise data to AI, period, full stop. Like we work with very, very security sensitive clients. And enterprise data just can't go to any generative AI endpoint. We use AI very, very heavily though. So let's look at how everything that you see in the black text, this came from source code from an AI, we call them AI ready tasks. So everything in black came from task source code. Everything in red came from enterprise data. To really get under the hood, when we build these AI ready tasks in our CI/CD pipeline, we're doing, think about it almost like, if you're familiar with HIDE, like hypothetical document embeddings, we're doing a process similar to that, where we'll take a source code for a task and expand. The task could be like a quarter page of code, and we'll expand that into like 15 pages worth of metadata. So that becomes huge amounts of text and then huge amounts of document vectors around that text. Mm-hmm. Think of this as like a combination of generative AI and machine learning, but all done on the source code. The stuff in red, so that's enterprise data. It never goes to LLMs. That actually goes into a knowledge graph that's much more structured around, hey, here's what the cart service is, here's what it's in, here's the cluster that it's in, et cetera. And the assistants are actually merging the two. They're doing both document vector work to say, think of that as like, how do I troubleshoot Kubernetes? As well as knowledge graph work saying, hey, so what's the cart service? What's near the cart service? Is there a Redis instance near the cart? Oh yeah, there's a Redis instance near the cart service. We lovingly call it the what data and the where data. The what data is all the data structures that we have around troubleshooting GCP in general. And the where data is troubleshooting this particular GKE cluster right here. So think of AI as what's coming together and sequencing the tasks. So to say, all right, after Eager Edgar ran cart service deployment health, the next thing it decided to run was the online boutique deployment, GitOps remediation. It could have run 400 other things, and it decided to run this one.
And did I already memory hole what language these assistants are written in?
We have a wrapper language that is called Robot Framework. It's an open source language. It's actually very popular in QA. We chose it because you can mix and match what we call these keywords. You can have some keywords that are written in Bash, some keywords that are written in Python. If we have our way with it, some keywords that are written in Java, and on a roadmap is to have some keywords written in Go. Think of these as function calls, and each function call can actually be written in a different language. We think that's pretty special because our community will not agree on which language to write these things in. So we chose this mix and match. It's also, frankly, ChatGPT and Claude Opus can generate Robot Framework just fine, and and pretty much generates like syntax perfect robot framework because it's such a verbose language, which is really, really nice. And we have, our own sort of Devon style thing. This is very, very, very much an alpha, but it's pretty exciting, I think, where we're going to start saying, all right, give a little snippet of text for the kind of AI ready task that you want, and then have this thing build the first draft so that you don't even need to know very much about the language. You're literally just going to be editing bits of code here and there. Ideally, we want it so that you don't need to know anything about our SDK, know nothing about our APIs, just kind of roughly describe what you want, and then have it come up with a really, really good first draft that represents what an expert in our SDK would have done. It's rough, though. We're an alpha on that one.
So I can use it tomorrow? Is that what you're saying?
In the meantime, we put it on a little shortcut, a little wizard that says, hey, if you just want to create an AI-ready task out of a CLI command that you have, it's just a little wizard so you can do that in about 30 seconds. If you say, hey, I just want to create an AI-ready task out of a SQL query that I already have, great, same thing, a REST API call. So the common case ones, you don't need to know anything about the language underneath. The language is for the sophisticated things where you want to, where it's just a more sophisticated task that you want to run.
All right, looking at the chat, I think that's everything so far from the chat. Definitely keep asking. Kyle, I don't know if you have to run right at the 5:30 mark.
I'd love to stick around for the networking section.
All right, excellent. So keep the questions coming. I do have one non-technical question that I like to ask everybody. It's a career question. It's this one of those questions where we've most of the speakers have been in the industry for 20 years plus, have learned a lot of things, how to navigate the tech world, the business world. For those that may be in the community or on the call that are younger, maybe still in college or just out of college, any kind of tips or advice that you would give them, or even thinking, if you could have told young Kyle some advice when he was 20, what might that be?
That was a beautiful question. As a shameless plug, well, I'm very proud of all the presentations that I've given. Well, not all. I'm proud of about 80% of the presentations that I've given over the course of my professional career. There's one that I'm really proud. I got invited to speak at the Stanford Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders Summit. It's the most watched video that I've ever been a part of, and it specifically was like career advice. I've gone back to watch it. It was me from 12 years ago. And I kind of laid out this like chapter by chapter and compared it to books. So shameless plug, if you just search for like Stanford Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders and Kyle Forster, it'll come up. I don't have anything better than that. But it's really interesting as I look back on that. I now have a hunk of time after that, and I kind of have like another 2 chapters.
All right.
My biggest suggestion for people who are just getting started, and it shows up in with some really more pragmatic steps on how in that talk, is become the world's expert in something. If you pick your niche properly, becoming the world's expert in a small enough niche takes like 3 to 4 months. And then make a lot of people aware of the fact that you're the world's expert. And if you pick the wrong niche, well, okay, so there's 6 months of your life, but that's not like that much. Like, just do it again. Just really become the world's expert. Try to become like the number one, and then figure out ways to let a lot of people know that you're the world's expert. And then just repeat that cycle a couple of different times. The title of the talk is called A Nonlinear Path to Leadership. And I think it's a good playbook.
Well, we got a snippet here. We got the 10-second become the world's expert in a niche. Leverage that. But for the longer view, and I'll look up the video. It's already looked up. There there it is. I think I'll include it in the wrap up for this. So those that want a little longer view of things. No, that's great.
I hate to say I was thinner then, but I was thinner then.
These cameras put on 20 pounds.
Jim, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you to everybody who joined. It means a lot. I appreciate your support.